This is episode 2 of the English Speakeasy podcast, a podcast to help you practice your conversational English listening and speaking skills. I'm Michael. I'm an English teacher, podcaster, and the co-founder of Lang Club, a social English community where people from all around the world gather to practice their English conversation. Visit langclub.live.
I'm Clara Thea. I'm an English teacher, journalist, and podcaster. I'm doomed to keep learning all my life. As a bilingual person, I have started my podcast, The British Whisperer, a podcast about the right news for English learners in Italy to help them dissecting the latest news and stories from international newspapers. You can go to the website, thebritishwhisperer.com, to find all the info about it.
The English Speakeasy podcast is a podcast where you can listen to real English conversations about a weekly topic in order to improve your listening and speaking skills. But first, before we get into that, let's catch up. Is there anything interesting going on over there?
Yeah, absolutely. This was the weekend of the coronation of Charles III in Britain. So
yes, of course.
There was a big focus on that. Of course, you know, all the newspapers were catching on about that, you know, front pages, but not just in UK. Honestly, I have been following the newspapers of other countries, Italy, of course, but also newspapers from all over the world, and Spain, Germany, France. Everyone was covering, of course, the event, and maybe with some more details on, you know, just Harry's presence or
the drama, yes,
between Harry and the royal family. And so, that was maybe something more juicy to talk about.
Right. Well, of course, we in the U.S. are, you know, enamored with the royal family and just obsessed with them, specifically the drama of them all. You know, during both of the royal weddings in recent years, it's just been a huge deal, of course, everywhere, even in the U.S. So there's just something about it. But, I mean, even here in Thailand, people have been talking about the coronation. It's been a big deal.
It's been very, very popular, of course, expected. You know, there was a lot of people also connecting to see it live. And I think that there was, honestly, I have to say, there was a good reception also in UK, meaning, you know, many were skeptic that there would be a big turnout of people, considering the popularity of the Queen, the late Queen. But I have to say that everything went well, apart from the rain pouring down.
Well, not much you can do about that.
That's part of being British, after all. So, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, nothing quite as exciting here, I'm afraid. Just terrible weather. It's been very hot. You know, here in Thailand, it's been, today it was like 40 degrees. Today, it's miserable. It's 31 degrees outside right now, and it's 11 o'clock at night. So it's, you know, it's very hot. It's oppressive. Honestly, I've done very little. I've stayed inside. I've kept my aircon running. I'm not going out in this. It's awful right now.
Typical, so hot there, or?
Not this hot. Now, this is the hottest part of the year. So April and May are the hottest part of the year, but there's just a weird, they call it like a heat dome, a weird phenomenon where right now the heat is just kind of getting trapped over the city, and it's just really, really humid and hot. In the summertime, it can get up to, you know, 34, 35 degrees. 40 is really unusual. But
since last year, we have been experiencing a lot of heat waves in Europe as well. So I think, I mean, maybe they are becoming normal, which is not a big news, a nice news to hear. But I think we are all on the same page on that. I mean, climate change is part of our reality day to day. So we have to, you know, somehow, you know, just get used to it.
Before we play the conversation, let's go over some of the vocabulary and expressions that you will hear us use. Expat, noun. Short for expatriate, a person who lives outside their native country. Enamored with, verb phrase. Fascinated with something or someone. Late, as an adjective. Used to refer to someone who has recently died. Oppressive heat. It's a noun phrase. Extremely hot weather that is difficult to bear. To absorb. To learn or understand new information or ideas. Subtle. Adjective. Not immediately obvious or noticeable. To grasp. Verb. To understand or comprehend. To get by. Verb phrase. To manage or survive. To stem from. Verb phrase. To come from a particular source. Dialect. Noun. A form of a language that is specific to a region. Aubergine. Noun. A dark purple vegetable, also known as an eggplant in American English. Peer. Noun. A person who is equal in status to others in a group, such as a colleague or a classmate. To mitigate. Verb. To lessen or reduce the severity, seriousness, or painfulness of something. Alienating. Adjective. Causing someone to feel isolated. Monolithic. Adjective. Uniform or homogeneous in characteristics, attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. You can review these vocabulary words and phrases on our website. Click the link in the show notes to see the article that we wrote about this episode. You can also find discussion questions related to this topic.
So, talking about living in different places, we were thinking of talking about living as an expat, right?
Right. Something that I clearly have experience with, you as well. Let's just kind of talk about our backgrounds, kind of the places that we've lived. I'm from the U.S., of course. I've only ever lived in one other country, which is where I live now. That's Thailand. I came to Thailand as an English teacher a decade ago. It'll be a decade in just a few weeks. I'm about to celebrate my big anniversary. I came for a 1-year contract. Then I loved the city, loved the country, like, the food, the weather, except not right now. They would always trick us to renew our contract in the middle of winter when we forgot how hot it could get. But I ended up staying, and 1 year became 10 years, and it's become home. And that's me. So what about you? Where all have you lived?
These last, just 10 years, I have been living here in Italy. Since I explained before, my parents are, just half, Italian, half British. So my mom and my dad met in Cambridge, when they were both at college, and my father, who is Italian, was there to study. And so then they fell in love and they married. But then my dad found a job, of course, here in Italy. And so my mom and dad had to, of course, just come here. And that's why I have been living here for a long time, even if in the first years when I was at the kindergarten, I was still in Britain. And then I moved here when I was at the primary school. So that was a huge help for me to learn both languages, of course, so English and Italian as well, which I have to confess to our, just listeners, that is far more difficult than learning English, guys.
I imagine so.
I was lucky to, just learn all that when I was a kid, and avoiding to do it when you are an adult, which is, of course, more challenging. Yeah,
it's so much easier
kids
for kids.
Absorb everything very quickly, and that's one of the advantages of being exposed to a language when you are very, very little. And in Italy, I've also lived in different parts of the country, mostly in the north side. I lived in Torino, I lived in Milano, and I lived in the Dolomite. Yeah, in a tiny little town called Brunico, which is right, just above the city of Bressanone, which is not far from Bolzano, which is probably the main, which is known in South Tyrol, so Alto Adige. When I was working for a local company there, an American company that needed someone who was bilingual to, just get things right for their website, for their communication and socials, etc. And there, the funny thing is that they speak German. That was a big challenge because I studied languages when I was at high school. I studied German. When you then you were at high school, then usually after just some years you forget many of the things you have learned. So it was a big of a challenge for me to, just refresh everything. So I went to a German school to practice a little bit the German. But probably the funnier thing is that they don't really speak the so-called Hochdeutsch there, which is the German that everyone knows, but they speak a local dialect. So that made it even more trickier.
You know what? I can really relate to that. I actually also studied German when I was in school, in high school and university. And I remember one of the hardest things that ever happened was the professor put on a recording of some area in Switzerland, some dialect in Switzerland. Like, I have no idea what they're saying. I was getting a minor in the language. I didn't study it. And so this dialect, it was so different from anything I had ever heard. So I I have I have empathy for having to try to deal with the
yeah,
the
it was true.
German.
I mean, so every time I tried to use German, everyone was switching to Italian. Initially, everyone talks to you in German because that's their mother tongue. They were under the German empire there, the Austrian empire, of course, and so they are used to speak as the first language, and so everyone turns to you speaking in German, but not the real German. So it's this dialect. So at least just maybe you can try to communicate very briefly when you go to the supermarket or when you go to the post office, but that's the real minimum. But if you talk with someone, they immediately understand from your accent that you are a natural language speaker, local, and so they turn to Italian immediately, which is, funny. So you need to learn the local language. I mean, that's probably one of the first suggestion I would, just give to anyone moving to another country, is that to try to expose yourself as much as you can to the local language, to grasp a little bit, of it. You told me that you are actually, just also being exposed to the telephone there, right?
Right. And I think there's two reasons for that. Number one, it makes your life so much easier when you're able to have even basic conversations. If you're able to, like here in Bangkok, if I can go to the market, ask for something, how much does this cost, get in a taxi, give directions. It also, I think, is just, I'm a guest here in this country, and I think it's a sign of respect. Even if people around me can mostly speak English in Bangkok, I just think it's polite. If I'm going to make this my home, I should try to learn more about the culture, and a lot of that is through the language. I'm trying really hard. I've been trying hard for 10 years. It's not an easy language. And, even me, even as an English teacher, I have to admit I'm not good at languages. It's just not my strength. Even though that's what I do for a career, I'm not good at learning them myself. And Thai is difficult. It's got a different alphabet. It's a tonal language. So if you say a word with the wrong tone, it can mean something totally different. Yeah, one of the very difficult examples is the words for near and far. To someone like me who didn't grow up with the tonal language, they sound the same, but it's the same sounds with a different inflection on it, different tone. And so if you ask, is this near? Is the store near? Can I walk there? And they say, oh, it's near or it's far. It can be very confusing.
Which is, not such a subtle difference after all. So I imagine.
Right. But I am trying, and I can read the alphabet, which is great, and that's very useful. At least for, reading signs. If I'm on a train, I can know where to, what station to go to, something like that. And I can communicate well enough. I can definitely get by with what I know.
Which is very good. I think this is part of the experience of being in another country. Experiencing the language means also to understand the culture which is behind it. I think here in Italy, for example, people study Latin when they are at school. So I've studied Latin myself, and which is similar from some points, especially for the use of the cases, accusative, genitive, etc., to the German ones. So you have some similarities of the languages in Europe, and most of them are also stemming from Latin. Which is one of the first bases here in local schools in Italy, and also part of the culture because of the Romans, of course. And I think indeed in this way you can really understand more of the culture of how the local population was having some customs and habits, and how they developed also the local dialects, because in every region, for example in Italy, there is a local dialect which is normal, I think, for every country. I mean, if you speak with someone from Scotland, you probably won't understand anything if they speak very quickly, and you speak with a Welsh guy. I mean, they have a different kind of, their way of speaking, the accent and etc. But also some local dialect are very different. So in Italy, every region and every town, even if the same region, has a different dialect, which stems from just this use of was probably less cultured but more simple language that was used by the poor population, so not the literate ones, of course, in the past. And that stemmed from that, just a way to communicate between one another. But it's quite characteristic of every town you visit. So if, for example, you experience a local dialect in Sicily, you probably, even if you are Italian, you probably struggle to understand it because it's very difficult. And also if you go to Roma, for example, to Rome, or if you go to, just Bologna, you experience a totally different dialect there, which is part of the culture. Maybe also part of that, is the name, of the dishes. Isn't it also, common, just how they name dishes? So maybe to learn languages also through food.
Oh, absolutely. One of the first purchases I ever made when I came to Thailand, I had gone to a bookstore called Asia Books, which is an English bookstore, and I bought a set of flashcards that had common Thai dishes on it. And, there was a dual purpose. Number one, I was trying to learn them. Number two, if I didn't know how to say it, I could just show it to the person at the restaurant,
Brilliant.
And that was my earliest form before I could learn any words, right? Trying to communicate that way, because a lot of the local restaurants here don't really have a set menu. It's just, they'll make whatever you ask, right? It's just a person with a wok, and if you want fried rice, you can get that. If you want a curry, you can get that, a stir fry, but there's nothing really written down. So if you don't know what to order, it can be hard. So I just started by showing those flashcards. But food absolutely is a great way of connecting with wherever you are, whether you're living there or just traveling. I love trying local dishes wherever I go, even in my own country. Every state has its own state dish. It can be really fun to travel in the U.S. and try the state dishes too.
Yeah, I bet so. I mean, it's very important as a part of the experience you get, even if you visit another country as a tourist. I mean, try not to eat what you're supposed to eat. I mean, Italians here always complain about the way people cook pasta abroad, but honestly, I have to say they have some right in that, because it's quite different, the taste of pasta, but also the taste of the ingredients they use here. Like a simple pasta with tomatoes, tomato sauce is really totally different. And so this is very important when you experience that. So if you really taste what is real, the real one, the original one, the one you get in the country, then you will be able to tell the difference between maybe a restaurant that is, say, calling in itself Italian, but then the dishes, they didn't really sound as Italian. So, one of the things, for example, that Italians were, sometimes talking with them about food, when they travel, they told me this funny thing is that, Parmigiano for them is a cheese, of course, just a Parmesan cheese. And, there is a local dish, which is called, Parmigiana. Usually is with aubergines, and is like a sort of, really creamy, pasta dish that you cook in the oven, with aubergines in it and some, meat and some cheese on it. And for them is the Parmigiana. But, for example, in UK, sometimes they cook chicken Parmigiana, which is totally another thing, and I heard many Italians say, but how they could, just mix up chicken with Parmigiana, which is totally different, Right. So that's funny because, just then in every country, the recipes are changing. So that's why to know the original one might be interesting,
It tells you, what grows here, for one, what are the common ingredients, what grows here. And it can teach you how do people eat for, hundreds of years before we became, more globalized. And it is interesting, and it does teach you a lot. And
exactly.
Even how do you eat? Like in Thailand, people tend to eat family style. If you go out to dinner with a bunch of friends or family, you'll order several dishes and you'll share them all. Whereas in the US, we don't do that. We order our own dish individually for ourselves, typically, and so even how you eat can be different from place to place. And it's interesting. It does tell you something about the culture,
here in
too.
Italy, for example, it's very common to eat all together. I mean, the families usually are gathering as one of those probably more important aspects of being a family is to have at least one meal together a day. Even if you work, of course, you tend to have a meal at least probably at dinner with your entire family. So, just with your children and with your wife or with your husband. And that's very important for them. And they have this tradition, which is really, just to prepare things together, to cook together with their own mom or to cook together with their own grandmother. which is, I would say, maybe less common in UK, where, just to have probably a lunch. It's something common together as a family, something common at weekends, especially the Sunday roast, which is quite typical. Yes, usually on Sundays we all have a roast, roasted chicken, or just anyway something that is based on meat, which is of course just very, very characteristic of the British cuisine. And that's very important. So to learn all these things probably also tells you a lot about the people that live in the place, and then you can mingle probably a little bit better, won't you?
Yeah, one of the first things I always do when I'm going to a new country is I just like to look up what food should I eat? What are the must-have dishes that I have to have when I'm there? And I will try to seek them out. A few years ago, before things got the way they are now, I had gone to Myanmar. And one of their dishes there is tea salad. They actually cook tea leaves and they eat it like a salad. So you don't make it into a drink. It's cooked and sort of steamed, and they eat it like a salad. And it was totally different. I'd never thought of consuming a tea leaf like that before. And it was so interesting. It was really fascinating. Absolutely. It was something totally new. One of these
you can learn a lot dishes, food, also through wine, which is also part of the culture of just a local, just a place you visit. And probably through this kind of experience you can also get some acquaintances and meeting people that they can just give you some more aspects of the local culture and language as well.
Whenever you're traveling, people always want to share food with you. There's nowhere on earth where people are like, don't eat our food, exactly. Because there are parts of culture that can be more private, like, maybe religion or something like that, some more spiritual things, but food is not. Food is something that people will always want to share with you. And it is the easiest way to make new friends and, meet new people, I think, in a different country, because everyone is proud of their cuisine. I think every country on earth is proud of their cuisine.
Everyone has their own national recipes they are very fond of. And maybe some dishes they are really attached to since they are kids. So I think, and sharing is caring, so it's also a way to care about the other person, which is always good to experience. And Italy, I would say, is probably a very welcoming country for tourists. There are some differences, I have to say, between the north and the south, meaning that usually in the south people are even probably too welcoming with you, which is for example, can shock people that maybe are coming from, I would say, less, just maybe welcoming, or maybe a little bit cold, traditions and customs for example, Scandinavian people are not considered to be so, like the Mediterranean ones. So, I would say that maybe can be some shocking because they invite you, if you meet a family, they invite you to have dinner or lunch with them, even if you have never seen them in your life, which is not happening so often here in the north, instead, where people are a little bit more reserved, which I have to say is quite typical of most of Britain, particularly if you are maybe experiencing life in big cities such as just London or big towns in Manchester, etc., where you don't really have opportunity to connect to the community, the local community. So even if you you need to connect through a neighbor, you need to connect through a peer at work or to a peer at school, to get more into the local community, which would be, just a really good, maybe because you have also other people of your nationality there, which can help you with the paperwork, we can help you with, some, maybe some hints on what to do, what not to do. For example, when I was, just in South Tyrol, I had a nice neighbor. She was German, by the way. She was there. So the funny thing is that she was German. She was just speaking German, but living in Italy and not speaking any word of Italian because there German was the only one needed. Interesting. And she was explaining me what to do, where to go. Just especially as, just to do some of the paperwork, there. That was really useful for me, and also some local customs. So, for example, why, for example, the shops are really closing earlier there. which are the normal tradition, just in South Tyrol, and where I could expect people to know English or to know Italian better. All these things that were really used when I was living there.
It can really help to have someone that is experienced, and try to find that expat community. I mean, I had friends here that I really relied on that first year especially, and that can help you mitigate some of that culture shock that you might experience if you kind of know what to expect, or if you have someone that's able to explain things to you. It can lessen that experience of culture shock, which can be really unpleasant. I mean, I've had colleagues that have tried to come and work in Thailand that have wanted to come for a year, and just the cultural differences got too much for them, and they ended up leaving.
I think it's normal. I think it's normal to have a cultural shock. It's also a normal, especially if you, maybe are really, let's say, stranded there because of a job, and you don't really have someone there, maybe, a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a friend that can help you. Yeah. So, I would say that probably one of the most important things to do immediately is to try to connect with someone, even at a local pub, or, through, just a neighbor or someone that can help you to, just get into the things there. And also, just to rely on them for tips or for suggestions on what to do, where to go. Because it's really important to have someone, which can understand you. And also maybe, that can, help you if you feel a little bit of homesickness as well.
It can be a bit isolating and a bit alienating sometimes if you don't have that, and homesickness is normal. And I think part of that culture shock comes from that, missing the way things are done back home. And then it's normal. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to accept that things are going to be different and deal with it, but it can be hard. It really can be. Living abroad is great, but sometimes there are things that become frustrating. And
maybe all these things can make you appreciate more what you had at home. So, yes, I've met people who then have been teaching here in Italy for a while and then went back home with another spirit. I mean, yes, they were enjoying the sunshine, they were enjoying, just the Italian way of life, the beauty, the culture and everything. But then maybe they really missed some local traditions, maybe the tea at 5 p.m., whatever. I mean, or other little local things, the British humor, which is really totally different than the Italian one. And maybe some of these aspects that then they were more appreciating then when they were back home.
It allows you to look at your own culture through a different lens, sort of as an outsider, and more objectively, I think. I've experienced that with the U.S. Well, we've kind of touched on culture shock, but there's something I'm curious about, and that's reverse culture shock. Have you ever experienced any form of reverse culture shock after living in one place, and then you go back to a place that was home before, and then you find, well, things are a little bit weird. Like when you have looked at your own country more objectively, and then you go back and there's maybe something that you liked for example, from Thailand, and you go back to the US and you think, wow, now that's kind of strange and it feels odd. Have you ever experienced any reverse culture shock?
When I was probably one of the first, just experience I had when I was at the primary school here, was that I had no friends, and I know here what was typical was totally different, because here in Italy, unless you go to a private school, you don't really have to wear uniforms, which instead was quite common in UK, so boarding school especially, and even primary. I was wearing my uniform, the school one, and here it's not that common. So I was a little bit shocked to go into casual clothing. Yeah, and another thing is that here really really keen on fashion. So, also, just there were kids who were really, just having the latest brands because of their parents were wealthy and then they could afford that. And then, sometimes kids can be mean, and then showing off a little bit what I have, what you don't have. You don't have that. I have these. But all in all, was a little bit of the shock, I think, when I was very little, because I remember that clearly, just asking my mom, why should I wear a uniform? Why is not, just hard? And then I, of course, just then growing up, I learned to appreciate that as a form also to, probably be more expressive in what you, who you are, what you want to express with the clothing you use and you appear. Every one of us probably had a dark color period, where you were all wearing dark things because you maybe, disappear a little or, just express what was your dark humor, maybe probably in the teenagers years. It's quite common for every one of us. And then maybe change into some colorful person, who likes, just bright colors then later on. So probably the fact that here your uniforms are compulsory, has made me, just also more appreciating the way of using, also the colors of clothing as in my character's expression,
right.
How to express characters, and the character of a person.
Yeah.
And, so that was one of the things. And then probably I have to say, yes, more when I was already, just working, coming from, for example, Brunico to Verona, which is in southern Veneto, very close to Venice, where of course people that speak Italian. It was completely shocking because I didn't hear people speaking German. And so I was so used to hear speaking German that it seemed to be, oh, now I'm in Italy, but I was in Italy also before, wasn't it? So that was a bit shocking as well, so it's really changing the way you think also, because when you learn a language, you try to think in another language, and it's of course, very difficult, but, just, to being exposed to German sort of made me think somehow, just probably in a different way. And then coming back to Italian, all in all, just, 24 hours a day was a little bit shocking. What have you experienced similarly, probably?
Well, the language is a big one because when I'm in Thailand, even though I can understand some Thai, I have to work really hard to actually understand what people are saying. So, I'm not able to really listen in on a conversation. As soon as I touch down at the airport in the US and suddenly everyone is speaking English, for the first hour, it's like my brain is overwhelmed because it picks up every bit of English and it's understanding everything. And, you kind of have to learn to start tuning it out again. And it makes you feel a little bit dizzy in that case, because I've gone a year maybe without having everyone around me speaking English like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I've really taken on in Thailand is an attitude called Mai Pen Rai in Thailand, and it literally means don't worry about it. It's kind of like Hakuna Matata from The Lion King. It's just go with the flow, accept things as they come. Here in Thailand, I would say it's very much part of the Buddhist philosophy. Don't get upset about things that you can't control, and I think that's a great way to live, and I've really kind of adapted that a lot. That's not part of the culture in the U.S. People in the U.S. get very anxious and very, we expect everything to be on time. We expect everything to be done properly and rigidly. And so I've kind of learned to be Mai Pen Rai here in Thailand a little bit. And I'm appreciative of that. But when I go back to the US, I do have to adapt the other way as well. Go back to that way in order just to function, in that society.
Yeah, I think it's really probably interesting to acknowledge that, I mean, you have experienced, just the both world and the both way of just dealing with things, which is also part of here, just when you live in Britain, everything is really very, I would say, neat and polite and precise, which is totally different in Italy. Unless you live in South Tyrol, where I have to say everything was more similar to Britain than, because having a German mindset also compelled them to sort of, just be a little bit more ordered, more tidy, and etc. Especially when you are, just doing the paperwork and everything. And here instead in Italy, I mean, just so you really have to know, I don't know, maybe some saints above in the sky to make things go right. Sometimes because really, you really have to rely on someone that knows someone else who can explain you what to do, because things are not very clear. Things can change. Just maybe you do something like a procedure in one place, which is totally different. And then things, people tend to be a little bit more I would say relaxed, and probably you don't expect, just the people to be punctual here or to be, unless it's really business related. But, I would say that it's not like, just in Spain where people tend to be very relaxed. Also the timings of, for example, having dinner or having lunch are totally different, which you can experience similarly in the south of Italy, where people tend to dine very late, and also things to be probably also more relaxed in the terms of how you start your working day. Probably it's normal to go to work from 9 to 5, a normal way of working. And instead there are places or companies where you work very hard, even until 8 or 9 in the evening. Which is probably could be shocking for some people.
Definitely.
And so, just to see this difference, because definitely in the north, you can really experience that in Milan, in Torino, and cities who are, just a tendency to really rely a lot on business. But if you go to the south, if you go to Rome, even to Rome, not really south of Italy, you can experience a totally different way. Yeah,
that's
also working of taking the day by day things, and so that's part of the culture. And I think one of the suggestions is also to watch a local movie, tell you a lot about the characteristics. For example, here there is in Italy there is a movie which is called Welcome to the South, story of someone coming from the north side that goes to the south of Italy and have a complete culture shock. And it's very funny because there are a lot of the things that are actually just happening normally when you come from Milan or cities where you are used to be very punctual and tidy and things regularly, where instead in the south is really totally different. So also maybe watching some local movies could be interesting.
Yeah, I think so. I've seen a few Thai movies at the cinema here. Sometimes, with a field trip with school, we would go, and a lot of them are about history, Thai history, and a lot of them focus on the kings of the past. The monarchy is very important here, a very culturally significant institution, I guess you could say. And that's reflected in what movies are popular. Of course, that's not all of them, but a lot of them are historical dramas. Yeah, I think you're right. I think we can learn a lot through film as well.
Movies, maybe, just some of them, of course, are famous because they were, just maybe filmed by directors who are internationally acclaimed. But maybe also to look at something, just probably on all the streaming platforms we well know, that are maybe some minor movies, but that can help you to understand the culture or the city, because they are maybe filmed in the town you are going to live in. As a sort of, I would say, preparation, maybe something you can do also prior to going to another country. That could be, or read some books, not trying to enter in the culture when you are still abroad. That could be also a good idea.
On that note, there's so many movies and TV series and things, for example, that take place in New York City. And I've actually only been to New York once, but the one time I went there, it was so fascinating walking around. It felt familiar, because I'd seen it so often. And I'm not going to say I'm a New Yorker, not at all. I've been there. I spent 1 week there in my entire life, but it was weirdly familiar because I had seen it in so many movies and films, and I kind of knew how things worked. And so, of course, that's a famous example. It's a famous city, but I think that's a great way of trying to learn about wherever you're going as well. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's definitely part of the, preparation you could do at home, to investigate a little bit about, typical movies of the town you're going to live, or at least of the main, just probably if you're going to live in a small town, maybe the main city, which is very close to where you're going to live, and maybe some books. Just authors who have been traveling, maybe some also traveling guides could be even useful to, have at least some ideas of where you're going to live, especially because maybe some of the more international guides are written by expat people as well, so that people that were visiting countries as expats.
I love expat literature. It's really interesting. It's just a different perspective.
Yeah. So gathering some titles from the web, of course, you can really Google and find some local books, were, just written locally, or they were talking about the people living in a place, or how's life there. And one other thing I suggest, of course, being a journalist, is to read the newspapers as soon as you can grasp some of the meaning of the local language. Is trying to get at least maybe, just maybe sometimes in the weekend where you can find maybe some more kind of easier readings to do, just in the local in newspapers having just a special publication dedicated to the city or whatever. You can get really some good info from that as well.
You made a really good point earlier as well, the fact that that's not just for another country. That's even just for a different area. No country is entirely monolithic.
Yeah.
Just the examples you've given of just various different parts of Italy that are so different. Same in the US, of course. I mean, every state is its own little microcosm of culture. Same in Thailand. The south of Thailand is very different from the far north, for example, very different from Bangkok. So you also have to look at the area you're going to, specifically, if you can, the region you're going to.
Maybe be also, just trying to get, just probably more used to inform yourself about what's happening where you live. It is probably something that maybe if you work as an expat because you have a contract and you are, just staying in a country just for a while, maybe not that interested in, but that's part of your experience. It can really make your experience, wall. Especially if you have the opportunity to again, just really use some of the information at your own, disadvantage. Maybe discovering places or discovering things to do, or meeting other people.
I know that there's always economic considerations and reasons that people can't, but I think that if anyone has the opportunity to live abroad, I think they should definitely accept it, even for a short time. You can learn so much. You can grow so much, and it just gives you that great perspective and a new worldview.
Yeah, I have to say that coming, just from UK and living here in different parts, in different towns, I've just lived in the north side of the country. I have to say that it's totally different experience and widened my horizons a lot, the way I think. And it's really part of the experience, really, just with all the downsides you can have. But it makes you probably a more complete person. And so to live abroad really widens your horizons and way of thinking.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you for joining our conversation today. And for our listeners, we're going to be back next time with a different topic.
Absolutely.
Also to our listeners, what did you guys think about this topic? If you have any comments about living abroad, being an expat culture shock, even stories or anecdotes you'd like to share, send us an email. You can get in touch with us, englishspeakeasypodcast@gmail.com. We might just read and answer your questions in a future episode.
Fantastic.
And finally, again, if you want to practice English conversations just like this one, you can visit langclub.live, where you can join free discussion sessions hosted by certified English teachers like me. And then where can people find your other work?
When you can tune in to the britishwhisperer.com and you can see all the episodes that are uploaded onto Spotify or Apple Podcast. It's called British Whisper, so it's easy to find, and you will learn a lot about what is going on in Britain and beyond.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we will see you guys back here for another conversation next week here at the English Speak Easy podcast.